Oh, we're live now.
All right.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Q&A. We're with Owen King today, the author of the Curator, here live at the Virtual Village Hall. So thank you, everyone, so much for joining us today. If you could introduce yourself in the chat, that would be great. Maybe let us know where you're tuning in from. Owen's actually all the way in America. So if anyone's quite as far away as Owen, that would be great to find out.
Yes. Hello, everybody. Thanks for inviting me, Annabelle. I'm very excited to be here.
Oh, thank you for joining. We have just been talking before the session started, and we wanted to begin in the chat and open up the questions to you first. So we wanted to ask you all, who or what is your favourite fictional animal? If you could pop your answer in the chat, we'll go through some of those. But Owen, do you want to kick us off?
I think that I think my favorite is Charlotte from Charlotte's Web
Oh,
by E.B. White. I find her very compelling and amusing, and I've always loved the uh, sort of a simple beauty to that book by E.B. White. And I always think of the first line where that sets up the whole book, which is the little girl's father is getting the axe, right? And that's the whole book, right? Is can they save Wilbur, right, from the dad? And
yeah.
Wilbur's a great character too. But I always loved, and I love how smart Charlotte is, but I also um, I love how she doesn't. She's clever, but with the most important thing, which is that she's gonna die. She's totally straightforward with Wilbur.
Mm-hmm.
Like um, uh, she doesn't like mm, gild that. She's
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm gonna
Yeah.
die, and you're gonna have to go on without me. And I always found that quite moving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting as well to see animals not kind of portrayed as like cutesy things, like actual animals with emotions and thoughts. So that's always interesting. I think my favourite would probably be Paddington Bear. I love Paddington, like the Paddington movies. I think he's great, and he is quite cutesy, but
Well, he's a sharp dresser. I I think that there's very anthropomorphic animals can be wonderful in fiction, and
yeah.
I've written animals into fiction that had personalities that were very upfront. And one of the things I tried to do with the Curator was there's all these cats in the Curator, and with that, I tried to make them super real.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Especially because most of the cats in the book are feral.
Yeah.
They're driven by their own priorities, and oftentimes, pretty much all the time, we don't understand what they are.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I tried to go the opposite direction and
Yeah.
have them be compelling and interesting, and hopefully gain some affection for the reader, but while also being, flesh and blood
Yeah.
as much as
Being
possible.
cats.
Yes, exactly. I see
Yeah.
somebody likes Winnie the Pooh, and you got to love Pooh Bear.
Yeah, yeah. Catherine said Winnie the Pooh, and Paz is saying hello from Derbyshire. Hi, Paz. Oh,
Piglet's great. Yep.
Piglet. Yeah. Oh, Piglet's a cutie too. Yeah. I also like it. I don't know if you could count this as a fictional animal, but in Harry Potter, Professor McGonagall turns into a cat. I think
Right.
that's a pretty cool one. And yeah, bonus points, everybody, if you can think of a cat. Who's your favourite fictional animal? Oh, Nicola, hi from Liverpool. Hello.
Yes.
I'm in London. Owen is in New York,
Yeah, I'm
upstate
in
New
Ulster
York.
County in New York, which is about 2 hours north of New York City, and it's
Wow.
across. I'm on the side of the river across from Poughkeepsie, which
Okay.
is the near Kingston. Those are the two
Mm.
bigger cities uh, near where I live, although they're not huge cities by any means.
I always forget that New York is not just like Manhattan. It's like actually a big estate, isn't it? New York, like New York
Yeah,
State.
it's down there at the bottom of the state,
Yeah.
in the little, well, it's an island, and so I would take the Metro North to get there.
So, oh, hi, Julie from Rotherham. Thank you, everyone, for joining. If you've joined while we've been chatting, just to give you some context, we've been talking about our favourite fictional animals. So, a few people have popped that in the chat if you want to give yours. But yeah, we've just been going through mine and Owen's, different cats, different Paddington Bears and Winnie the Poohs, all the classics, really. But yeah, when the chat settles down, I will get started with the Q&A, if that's okay with you, Owen.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so
hi, Paz and Catherine and Nicola and Julie and everybody else.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you so much. Ooh,
Oh,
the
the
Moomins. Yeah.
But that's the question is, are the Moomins, obviously we're all animals, but the Moomins, I feel like they are something, they're kind of people, right?
Yeah.
They're, sort of hippo people.
Yeah, they are cute as well. I feel like everyone's going for very cute animals, which I would go for too. But yeah, all the animals in Animal Farm. That's a good one. All of the animals. Some of them are a bit horrible.
Well, there's also there's the wolves in the George R.R. Martin books. Those aren't very cute, but they're pretty awesome, right?
Yeah, yeah. Nicholas said, yes, hippo people is a good description.
No, I love them. I love the Moomins, and I feel like they're catching on here in the States after all these years. You see the Moomin toys and things in the bookstores now, and you never used to. It's sort of caught a little bit of a breeze here.
Yeah, no, they are great. I've never really been into Moomins like as a whole, like when I was little or anything. So I don't really know much about them, but I know what they look like. They're very cute.
Yes, they're very cute, and it's it's more it's more surreal, right? Than some of the other. There's a weirdness to it that's a little bit different and special from other children's books, I think. Oh, Aronson, he's great too. Yep, the Armored Bear.
Oh, hi from Scotland. Hi, Alison. Okay, so the chat does seem to be settling now, so I think now would be a good time to get into the Q&A if you're ready. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good quote from Alison. You ain't afraid, are you? Not yet. When I am, I shall master the fear. That's nice.
That's right.
Thank you, Alison. And hi, Amy, too. But yeah, I'll get started now. So thank you, everyone, for joining and for all of your comments so far. I'm really looking forward to receiving and asking Owen all of your questions. And thanks also to the Virtual Village Hall for having us. We really love doing these interviews. I'm Annabel Morgan here from Listening Books. For any of you in the audience who aren't familiar with what we do, we're an audiobook lending charity here in the UK, and our service is for anyone who finds that their ability to read is affected by an illness, mental health condition, disability, or learning difficulty. I think our details will be shared throughout, so if you think our audiobooks could help you, then please do check us out. But that's not why we're here today. We're here to talk to Owen King all about his latest novel, The Curator. So thank you so much, Owen, for being here today. We really appreciate your time.
It's my pleasure.
I am going to give a quick introduction. I hope it's not too embarrassing, because sometimes it is. But yeah, Owen King is a best-selling author, a Sunday Times bestseller, whose recent novel, The Curator, was one of our Members' Choice Award nominees for 2023. Owen's also known for short stories, graphic novels, and television production. Our members here at Listening Books absolutely loved The Curator last year, so we're really delighted to have you here to talk with us all about it.
Thank you for having me. It's great.
No, thank you. Right, so We'll begin now then. If anyone has any questions, please pop them in the comments and I'll try and get through as many as I can. But to kick us off, Owen, if you could just maybe give a brief introduction to the Curator for anyone who hasn't read it or listened to it yet. Yeah.
Okay, well, it's a sort of alternate history fantasy, I guess. But the history part of it's a little bit vague. The book takes place in a city that's sort of an unnamed city that's sort of a amalgamation of Victorian London and Five Points, New York, and Findasical, I'm not sure I'm saying that right, Vienna. Those are the cities that I was thinking of when I created it. And this city is the metropolis in a small country that has undergone a bloodless revolution. And the revolution has sort of stalled out right at the finish line. The city has been captured by the revolutionaries, but they don't have control of the whole country, and they're trying to negotiate with the royalty which they've evicted. And against that backdrop, a young woman who is a domestic servant has sort of insinuated herself into a position of small authority, and she wants to, and she's, by doing so, she has gotten herself a position as the curator of this very obscure museum on this very obscure street. And she's done so for reasons that aren't immediately clear to the reader, but there's something she wants to learn about in this place. And so she's quite persistent and quite canny and quite smart. But one of the things about Dora, is that she is very retiring. She doesn't want anybody to notice her because she knows that in this very patriarchal society where she's trying to operate, that will be of no benefit. It's much better for her to sort of operate underneath everything. And what else? So the story is about her trying to solve this mystery that's not immediately clear at the beginning. And there's this revolution going on in the background. And it's this strange city that's sort of familiar, but it's also different. People there, their religion is, the most favored religion is a sort of cat worship. And there is a sort of conspiratorial sense of wheels inside of wheels moving in the background, and Dora, our protagonist, has to survive and solve the mystery that she wants to solve, but also, it brings her up against these larger machinations that are going on politically.
Yeah. We do have a great question from Paz to start us off. Thank you for the overview. Paz has said, I love the audiobook. Did you have any involvement in choosing who narrated it? How similar is Marin Ireland to the voice that was in your head when writing the book?
Yeah, she's, it's not exactly that. I definitely had my own voice in my head when I was writing the book, but I did want Marin to be the narrator. She was my first choice. I've loved all her performances that I've heard. She was unbelievable in her performance of Sleeping Beauties. And what I like so much about her is that, like all great actors, she is bringing her own creativity to bear on the performance. And so if what she's doing is different than what I heard in my head at any point, it's always better than what I heard in my head. So for instance, there are these characters who never leave this pub, these drunks that basically live there. And there's this one drunk who has a sort of permanent slur that he speaks with. And when I wrote him, I thought of him as being very big and grandiose, you know? And then when Marin personifies him, he's very subdued and like she really leans into the sloppiness and sadness of him, and I like it better. And there's still sort of a grandeur to some of the bigger things that he says, but it's tinged with this sort of alcoholic sadness that she found in the character. And now when I read him, that's how he sounds to me. And when I listened to the book, when I didn't plan on listening to the whole thing, because oftentimes when you listen to somebody read your book out loud, it's quite embarrassing because all you hear is it just sounds a little strange. But
Yeah.
She's so good. I listened to several hours of it, and I was just entertained. You know, I was really enjoying it because she made me look so good. So yeah, I love her, and I love that performance.
Yeah, no, it was great. I listened to the audiobook too, and I would really recommend it to anyone who's in the audience that hasn't listened to it. But there are a few interesting things that I picked up on there. It's interesting that you like the changes that are made. I don't know if this is just my personality, but I feel like if someone was reading my work and it wasn't how I'd intended it to be, I might be like, oh, like what's going on? Like this isn't what I wanted. But for you, it's an improvement almost, would you say?
Well, because she found something that was there that was almost subconscious, you know? And I think it's like that when you write, when you script things and the actors perform them, it is a performance, you know? They're taking this thing and turning it into their thing, and you want to give them the leeway to do that. And when they're brilliant, like Marin is, new amazing things emerge that you suddenly see.
Yeah.
So I love that, and I love that I'm find it very gratifying that she was able to find that in there. You know, that it had like a space for her to get inside.
Yeah. Claire has asked. Sorry if this has already been asked. I joined a bit late, but why cats? Which I love, by the way. I assume she means why cats as the gods in the city.
Well, I thought to myself, you know, I had written quite a bit of the book, maybe like half of it, and there was no real, maybe not half of it, like a quarter of the book, and I thought to myself, well, there's no real religious life in this city, and that I don't believe that would be the case. There would be a religious life, and but I thought to myself, it shouldn't be exactly parallel, because everything in the book is just a little bit to the left or to the right, or just a little bit out of focus. It shouldn't be the same as something that we recognize. And so I did have some of those, you know, there's clearly some sort of Christian life in the city. There's some people that mention that, but I created this pagan cat worship religion that's especially important to some of the less well-off people in the city, and I thought that helped. Well, one, it was fun and added to the sort of atmosphere of mystery, because cats can be so peculiar and hard to read. But I also thought that it helps teach the reader that things are going to be a little bit different here. You know, that you may recognize some things, but keep in mind that some other things are different, and you have to be aware. You have to be on your toes a little bit for those differences.
So would you say you chose cats because of cats as what they are? They're a bit you can't mysterious. You don't really know what's going on, or would it be because you love cats?
It's both.
Yeah.
It's both, and I thought that they feel magical
Hmm.
to me, um, and Dora has a little bit of cat in her, in the way that um, she can be quite secretive,
Yeah.
and but at the same time, I tried to work crossways against some of the expectations that a reader might have about a book with magic and cats. The cats act like cats, like real cats.
Yeah.
They're flesh and blood. They're not um, anthropomorphic in the way that, say, Charlotte or
Hmm.
um, Pooh is. They're more flesh and blood, and killing little creatures to survive, and setting forth on missions that we don't understand as human beings.
Hmm.
And we just observe the cat, and hopefully the cats, but there's one cat in particular, but hopefully the reader or the listener, in the case of audiobooks, ultimately feels like they have an idea of what that cat, whose name is 17, is up to,
Hmm. Yeah.
what
Yeah.
her
I was
purpose would be.
I was going to say in the chapter which is written from 17's perspective, but then it's not from like inside her brain, if you get what I mean. It doesn't talk about her emotions or her thoughts. It's just like a cat doing cat things. Did you find that difficult, or to try and find out what a cat would be doing behind the scenes, or or easier than human?
No, I really liked. I found that chapter really easy to write, and um, I most of the book is told in the kind of third person that I believe we would call free and direct discourse. So it's inside the third person point of view, but filtered through the characters' thoughts.
Hmm.
Um, so that's all the human characters in the book, and there's a bunch of them. We go from Dora, who thinks of herself as D, we go from her to somebody else, and back to her, and to somebody else, and back to her, and that's usually the way that the book is
Hmm.
arranged. But with 17, what's so fun is that I didn't have to filter it through her thoughts. We're
Yeah.
just seeing what she's doing and seeing what she's seeing. It makes it a lot easier on a descriptive level. It's not quite so involved. I'm not having to. I only have to think about what I believe she'd do. I don't have to explain to the reader why she's
Yeah.
doing it.
Yeah.
It's up to them to make that interpretation.
Hmm. Claire's commented that alone must have required a lot of thought to make that work in the book. I agree. Yeah. Um, oh, Amy has asked, have you got a particular process you use for world building? There's lots of intricate world building in the book.
That's a great question. I don't know if it's a particular process, but I did a lot of reading about Victorian life and about 19th century cities, and I wanted to get details that made the reader feel like they were in a place where the characters dealt with real challenges on a day-to-day basis,
Hmm.
that they have to eat, and that's not that simple, and they have to get from place to place, and there's no cars to drive them, and that everything is limited by the technology and by the societal rules that are in place in this unnamed city. So I read, I want to say, like a dozen, 2 dozen different kinds of books about those cities and Victorian life, and those inspired me with some of the world building, and gave me some details in other ways. And so that's sort of the way I do it. I think that with research, you always end up doing a lot more than you need to do, and it gives you confidence that you can make these leaps
Yeah.
and build these city streets that are just made of words. Um, and the only way it's you can never do too much unless you think that you have to put it all in, right? And then if you have to put it all in, it could be quite lugubrious. And so you just want to have those details that you feel like you just want to have those details come out of your research that you feel like are evocative and telling, and then get on with the story part.
Mm-hmm. That kind of leads on to another question we've got from Paz, who's asked which writers have inspired you.
Well, this book is very much inspired by Little Dorrit, which is one of my very favorite Dickens novels, and one of the, I think probably my first encounter with Dickens was watching the public television. I'm sure it was BBC, but it was the Little Dorrit version with Alec Guinness in it when I was a child, and I watched it with my family, and I think that was an experience. You know, I was probably, I don't know, 10. That if I had come at him in a different way, I might have said, "Oh, this great big book looks extremely difficult to me." But I watched the show, and I was totally it's just an enthralling story, and I was fascinated by those characters and the debtor's prison and how Amy Dorrit, selflessly strives to do all these things for all these people that don't really appreciate her, take her for granted, and then of course Arthur Clennam's mother is, bizarre and is up to something that we don't entirely understand. And eventually, in the end, her house just explodes or collapses, which is one of those great Dickens things. So that was my first encounter with Dickens, and then after that, I got into reading the books. And in the case of the Curator, Dora, who thinks of herself as Dee, is a domestic. She's kind of a very distant echo of Amy Dorrit. Mm-hmm. But I think the one thing about Little Dorrit is she's so selfless. Sometimes she feels, kind of saintly, and I don't really believe in that. And so Dora is somebody that's very flawed and has failings, but hopefully we love and admire her heroism and her fearlessness and her smarts, even though she does have some failings or some things that make her less than perfect. Mm-hmm. So anyways, that's a long way of saying I think in the case of, I always try to do something different, really different with every book. It's kind of an obsession of mine, and with this book I wanted to write my version of a Victorian novel, Mm-hmm. So I was thinking about not reading at the same time, because I can't read in a place that's like what I'm writing, I was mm-hmm. only reading modern things as I wrote the book. But I was trying to think about Dickens and Trollope and Elizabeth Gaskell and Zola and how their books felt to me in my mind, and I tried to make the book have some of that feeling, to catch some of that. So mm-hmm.
No, it definitely did. I was wondering why you didn't set a specific time for the novel, like even though it obviously has a lot of inspiration, Dickensian, Victorian, that's very clear. There's never a date, like it's not set in stone. So why did you decide to keep it vague, keep it blurry?
I think it struck me as I thought it felt more in keeping. One of the things that's revealed, this is a spoiler alert, so shut your ears, is that there's more than one world, and it it seemed more interesting to me to be in a world that's a version of ours but different than it seemed to be in a world that is definitely the one we know, and then learn that there are other worlds.
Mm-hmm.
So that seemed more done to me. It seemed more interesting. I mean, it's kind of all been done, but it seemed more interesting to me to start from the difference and then reveal. And I also think that it's just from a creative standpoint, it was more fun to borrow and from different time periods that were sort of close together. It seemed more fun to do that and more surprising for the reader, but certainly probably for a lot of readers is quite annoying. If you're like, I would like this to be in a time and place that's definite. I would understand that. That's just a different point of view, but that's not what I did.
Yeah, no, I really liked it. I remember there's one moment in particular where Dora finds a Gucci handbag, and it just made me laugh. And she didn't know what Gucci was, and she was like, "Oh, this bag must belong to a woman called Gucci. That's why it's Gucci's
Yes,
handbag."
yeah. There's a sort of hole opens, and this museum where she's curating, or she really isn't curating it. She's just like, well, she is in a way. She's taking care of it. She's improving it. Some things start appearing that don't belong there, and one of them is a mannequin with a Gucci handbag. Yeah, I thought that was fun.
Yeah, it was. Claire's laughing in the comments.
Yeah.
She's also asked, it's a big world. Did you have any ideas or characters that you had to discard as you couldn't fit them in?
I trimmed a few characters quite a bit. I think in retrospect, anytime I would be surprised if any other writers don't feel the same way. I always end up publishing a book and then feeling like, oh, well, if I could have just made this a one change, it would be even better. And certainly with the Curator, I have less of that feeling than at any other time. But I think that there's two characters. There's a man who drives a tram, and there's a character who's sort of a failed academic, and they end up having a role in the plot late in the book. And I think in retrospect, I kind of wish they were just one character. Although that would have taken some reimagining that made them neither character. But in any case, there was a lot more about a few characters, and I tried to chip them away so that it was just the most important things. I mean, I'll give you an example of the way that I write, though. There is a scene early in the book where Dora goes. She's been a domestic at this university, and she goes to the apartments, the rooms of a young man who was associated with the crown, and that young man has fled. And Dora goes through his apartment looking for stuff that she can use. And when I wrote the scene, it was like 3 times as long because she finds all this different stuff. And I didn't know, I mean, I had lots of places along the way I was going to go in the book, but I wasn't sure exactly what parts of the things that she was going to take from this apartment might be useful for my story. So I have her take just tons of stuff in the first draft. And then by the time, I'd gotten to the latter stages of the book, I knew that, well, she only really needs to find these 3 things in his apartment, really 4, so that there's one thing that's like not necessary, so it's, you know, believable. So it's not just like totally, it's not just a facilitation. So I had to go back and cut out all those things, but that's kind of the one of the ways in which I write, is that sometimes if I am not exactly sure what might come in handy later, I'll just make it big, and then I know I can go back later and put it through the shrinking ray.
Yeah. Amy's asked a question which I think relates to like television production. She's asked, do you think that being a writer makes you a better producer or vice versa?
Well, I don't have a ton of experience as a producer. Crediting is kind of a funny thing, but I think the experience of writing for television and doing a little bit of film scripting. I've never had a feature make it to the camera. I've only done TV and I've done short films. I think that it does, it gives you an idea of what is possible with the budgetary constraints, but then again, at the same time, you don't want to write a story, you don't want to write a script for production. Mm-hmm. You want to be as imaginative and adventurous as you possibly can, and then maybe then you want to start thinking about what's actually viable. But I think it's good to have it, to see it from both sides, and I think that script writing and I think that it is helpful sometimes in a plotting sense, in all kinds of senses, because it's a kind of writing that boils things down to their very just the essentials, because scripts don't really have the descriptive part of it is very limited, and you're not, the voice part of it is very limited, and that is the hardest part of book writing, is the voice. You have to have a consistent voice, and you have to have a voice that can hit all the notes that are important, and I think that's why it's hard for a lot of writers to get into, you write one book and getting into the next book can be tough, because you got to lock into that voice that's going to be the voice of that book. Mm-hmm. With films, when you write those, you're doing the story and the characters, but the director and the actors kind of make the voice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Something I was thinking when listening to the Curator was that there are so many characters, and they all, I can just imagine that they all have really interesting backstories, even though we don't find out some of them. So I was thinking that it would be really good as like a series of spin-offs and finding out more about each character, like a kind of like Hunger Games situation. You go back in time and you find out why President Snow was evil. Like you can find that out with different characters from the Curator. Do you think that would be a possibility? Because I, for one, would love that.
I have a pretty good idea for another book in the world. I don't know if I feel like it's something I want to do right now, and I don't know. I'm a little reticent, because I feel like to write a sequel, you need to have such an enormous audience that knows the premise that you're building on. Mm-hmm. I do have another idea for a story that would be set in the same world later in the timeline, with a few of the same characters, but with some characters that were mentioned. There's a character named Ike, who's usually, people seem to like him the best, and he's sort of a streetwise young guy. I think he would be in it. Maybe not as the main character, but he would be an important figure in that. But yeah, I'm glad that you got that out of it, because one of the things that I love about Dickens especially, is the way that all the minor characters just pop.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everybody is so eccentric
Mm-hmm.
and vivid, even if they only get 2 scenes. And I tried to do that with every character that crosses onto the stage of the book.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you think about like the original publication of the Dickens books, they were often in like periodicals, right? So
Right.
each periodical had to have something that made people want to read the next one. And I think you could really see that inspiration in the Curator. Like every part kind of like led into others. And I know at the end, when all of these connections were coming together, I was like, oh, how did this happen? Like just before my eyes, all of these like threads started unraveling. But yeah, I can definitely see that inspiration. We had a comment that I didn't have time to read out earlier, but Nicola said, I've not read the book yet, but now I know there is cat worship. I'm looking forward to it even more.
Well, I mean, you know, there's cat danger too. So, you know, our main cat is pretty safe, but
Yeah.
I can't make any promises.
Yeah, there was one comment in the book itself that I've been thinking of when we've been talking about cats. There was someone who said that the newspapers are full of stories about cats to distract from real issues, like human
Right.
issues. And I thought that was so funny. Do you think that was the kind of like a conscious comment comparing cats to like today's celebrity culture?
Maybe in a way, I was just thinking it was just one of those things that was improvised because it made a lot of sense that um, the people that are conspiring would see to it that the really serious issues got pushed to the side, and there were these articles about this missing cat. But I think, I mean, even today, I mean, it's like, you know, no, by no means do I want to say anything negative about Larry, you know, right? But Larry, the English prime minister's cat, right? You know, like there's a lot of, I see articles about Larry every once in a while, and it's like, you know, Larry's doing his thing, and we are curious, but it's not like you know, it's not like the first thing, right? And so, oh, I see there's a question that says, let me emphasize, by no means am I casting aspersions on Larry. He's awesome. Okay, how long did it take to write? Allison asks. Well, the Curator is based on a short story that I published, I think, way back in 2014. Not 100% sure on the timing of that, but the short story is Larry is the best thing about Downing Street. Love it. The short story is just about Dora and her significant other, who's this sort of callow young man who I hope the reader feels like grows through the course of the book, named Robert. And it all takes place in the museum, and the revolution is even farther in the background. Mm-hmm. So it's a long short story, but the world building is totally different. It's all gestured at. You don't actually step into any of it, and you know, there's almost none of the supporting characters. So I wrote that way back in 2014, and I want to say that was like about just like a 40-page short story, and then I started writing the book, I think, in 2017. So it probably took me about 3 years to really write, maybe a little bit longer. And it ended up tonally, it's quite different, I think, from the story. The story's kind of darker. Not that the book isn't pretty dark in places, but everybody's motivations, even the sort of protagonist characters, all their motivations are a little bit corrupted.
Mm-hmm. So you said that in the short story, revolution wasn't at the forefront. It was kind of more of a focus on Dora and her boyfriend. Yeah. So what made you decide to bring revolution into the forefront, to make it like a key point of the novel, like when writing it?
I could see it all when I was writing the story. I just had I could really envision the wider world. and the kinds of people that were in it. And I thought she was so interesting, and I wanted to spend more time with her and know more about her. And I wanted to see more of the world through her eyes and explain more fully the nature of this conspiracy that's happening in the background.
Mm-hmm.
And I just felt like there was a whole three-course meal there, and I
Yeah.
wanted to have it, you know? But then, like any time you do something like that, you know, you end up leaving the story way behind. And
Yeah.
so the short story has, you know, it's like 40 pages. It's quite a long story, but there's probably like 6 sentences from the story that made it into the book. And they're all applying in a different way than they were intended the first time, because the
Mm-hmm.
characters, even Dora, is quite different, I think, in the book.
Yeah. And so do you find that like as you were writing the novel, that Dora, the character that you had from the beginning, kind of warped into someone else?
Yeah, she's really different. She's more of a hero in the book, and in the in the story, she's more of a schemer, I guess. I like the story though. I like that it's different. I like that it's like a weird sibling to the book.
Mm-hmm.
You know, kind of like, you know, Mycroft to Sherlock a little bit.
Yeah. I'm looking at the time, and I think that we are going to have to wrap things up
Okay.
shortly. But I do have one more question for you from me. Um, if you could ask for readers to take one thing away from the curator, from the reading or listening experience, what would that be?
Um, well, I want people to engage and um, get wrapped up in the story, in the world, um, in the fullest way possible. I want it to be satisfying and diverting, and if it's thought provoking in any way, if it makes you think about uh, politics or human relations in some deeper way, I certainly hope it does. But that's secondary, and once the book is out there, it belongs to the world to engage with it however they would like.
Yeah. No, it really does. And I find that interesting that it kind of relates to what you said earlier about Marin reading a different voice into different characters. Like even though you write the book, you only have so much control over it. Like it really goes on to be written into something else by so many different people.
Yeah, and you don't, people bring their own set of critical ideas to everything that they read or watch.
Mhm.
We all have um, our own blueprint for how that's going to go. And
Yeah.
who am I to say that any way of reading the book or listening to the book is the wrong way? You know, everybody's gonna do it their own way. It's out of my hands now.
Yeah, it's good to hear that you don't mind people reading different things into it. I would imagine it's read quite differently in like America to in the UK as well, with certain like political allusions throughout. It makes a different reading experience. But anyway, that's a whole other
Yeah.
conversation. Yeah, I am going to have to wrap things up, sadly. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining, for all of your
Thank
really
you, and thank
interesting
you, Annabelle, and
questions.
everybody that came. And you know, if you enjoyed the book, I'm thrilled. And if you're thinking about listening to it, that's great. I hope you like it, and I appreciate you visiting, letting me visit, I should say, welcoming
No,
me into your home.
no, thank you. We really appreciate you giving the time. And thanks again to the Virtual Village Hall, of course. They are great. So if you enjoyed this, please come back for our other talks, and they do things daily, so check them out. But yeah, thank you again, Owen.
All right.
Okay.
Take care, everybody.
Take care. Bye.